Hello, it's the 2nd of March and today I want to talk about planting onions. It may seem a bit early to some of you, but this is southern England and the temperatures are generally warmer here. You'll clearly have to check the appropriate time to plant onions for the area in which you live.
Onions are usually planted in the form of onion sets, such as this one. These have been grown from seed by the suppliers last year, and now we have baby onions that are ready to put into the ground. At that end is the roots, and that end is where the leaves will come through. These are a variety I've used regularly now called Setton, S-E-T-T-O-N. Here's the bed I prepared for the onions. As I've mentioned before, I use weed suppressant fabric quite extensively, but it's definitely not single-use plastic. That particular section you see there has been around the onions now for more years than I care to remember, and hopefully it will be around for many more. The beauty of weed suppressant fabric is that it suppresses the weeds. I mean, if you add up all of it in the garden, it must save an absolutely huge amount of work. It also can help to keep the ground warm, or warm up more quickly as we come into spring, and it helps retain moisture. I mean, there's a huge amount of advantages to it. Anyway, what I did was to just lay that out on the bed, push down the sides, tuck it in, and then I dug out each of the sections for the onions with that spade there, which is normally used for digging shallow pipe trenches in a garden. It's quite a narrow spade, and you can lift out very easily the sections of the ground where the slots are. And then I just put those, for each one, put it into a wheelbarrow, mix it up with a bit of fertiliser, then put it back in the hole, and there you are. It's sort of part of a principle I've tended to use over the years, which is about treating where I'm planting annual vegetables almost like a pot in the ground. So instead of doing them in pots, one looks after the ground that they're going to go into as you would do if they were in a pot. So you've got the soil there mixed with organic fertiliser, and also mixed with something else. I won't talk about particular types of fertiliser because you probably your own preferences, and you can read what it says on the packet. I mean, with fertilisers normally, there's a great interest in the NPK values, the nitrogen, the phosphorus and the potassium levels. But there's a couple of other elements, well, there's several other elements, but a couple of other elements that are really important: magnesium and sulphur. One year I thought, before I could recognise potato blight, that I had potato blight because the leaves of the potatoes were turning a brown colour. It turned out to be a magnesium deficiency. And so with the fertilisers I generally mix in Epsom salts, magnesium sulphate, which compensates for deficiencies in these gardens. I mean, people talk about it as if it's a magic sort of cure-all for all garden ills, but it certainly does add sulphur and magnesium, which are two very significant elements for plant growth after the nitrogen, the phosphorus and the potassium. The other things to mention are that the amount of soil I dug out of each trench was down to about 4 inches. And the other thing is that the weed suppressant fabric wasn't on this bed last year, it was somewhere else. Really, one should try to not grow the same sort of thing in the same location for as many years as you can possibly get away with. So what I'm doing now is just planting the onions, just making a hole in the little hole in the ground with a finger, pushing in the onions and making sure they're well in the ground. I usually make sure they're buried to at least 3/4 their depth. There seems to be a bit of a recoil in the soil, and sometimes I've planted them and come out and some have got out. So I make sure they're pretty deep You don't bury them completely, you need the little brown tops where the leaves are going to come out sticking up above the surface. And then I use a method of spacing them, because I know how wide the beds are, placing one at each end, one in the middle, and then I keep dividing the space by 2 until I've got a couple of inches between each of them. The final thing I'm doing is just giving the onions a good watering in so the earth really consolidates under the roots. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you might join me for the next one, which will be about container planting of potatoes.